We all know what charity is, right? We've heard arguments about it, maybe given it, maybe taken it at some point in our life. After all, even when you do everything right, you can still fail, and it's not your fault. That is how life works, and we all know it. Bad luck, poor planning, unexpected costs, they can all push people into debt and homelessness. Of course, those with natural disadvantages, like disabilities or children, have a much harder time achieving financial stability and success, so they obviously deserve some help. But anyone can have a hard time and become poor. Welfare is intended as a safety net to help those who made mistakes. It should be hard to fall into but easy to climb out of, so as to get people back onto their feet. Surely this can't be a hard concept, right?
Unfortunately, no. You see, when you give people a positive effect to their lives, you are giving them an incentive, a reason to keep doing whatever prompted you to give them the benefit in the first place. You give people a gift for having less children, over time, people will have less children. If you reward literacy with more job opportunities, eventually more people will become literate. But unfortunately, incentives have bad potential as well as good. For example, weak penalties for theft and lots of valuable goods in one area functions as an indirect incentive to commit the crime of theft. This leads us to one of the few things universally considered undesirable: perverse incentives.
Incentive is a reward or a benefit that accidentally encourages the opposite behavior that the giver intended. Their mere presence causes the problem to worsen, regardless of whether anyone takes advantage of the poorly designed benefit or not, merely because the giver will either have to tighten criteria and not help as many people as they would want, or open loopholes and invite abuse. How could this happen, you ask? The answer: it has happened many times already.
When Vietnam was under French colonial rule, they implemented many programs intended to get the Vietnamese to modernize their country. One technique they tried was paying people for every severed rat tail they turned in. This was supposed to get people to kill rats, cut their tails off, and turn them in to get paid. Simple, right? Oh no. Instead, some people began breeding rats, cutting off their tails, and continuing to breed the rats for even more rats. Once other people found out how much money they could make from rat farms, almost everyone quit killing the rats and instead started breeding them. Once the French government found out, they stopped paying people for rat tails. After a while, they brought back the program, but this time with rat heads instead. Unfortunately, in the interim, people learned that they no longer had an incentive to keep breeding rats, and everyone released their rats back into the wild.
But let me back up a little bit to
much
a time
worse
before
than
that
before.
list.
Okay.
Around the turn of the century, the French were rebuilding Hanoi. And, the French are French, so they didn't want it to be just any city. It was going to be a model city. We're talking evidence of French civilization, the most beautiful city in Asia.
And one of the key elements of French urbanism, in addition to the beautiful buildings and the wide streets, were sewers. Unfortunately, there was one unintended consequence, and that's that the sewers provided a wonderful home for rats. So after the sewer system was laid, there started to be reports of rats coming up through the flush toilets into the stately villas of the French neighborhood, thus undermining the French sense of superiority and the prestige they enjoyed in living in the nicest, most advanced part of the city.
It was the Rat Highway.
It's the rat superhighway, yeah. And the situation became all the more serious during moments of bubonic plague outbreak. And here you have the bubonic plague, which the French viewed as a Vietnamese problem, making its way into the French neighborhoods because the rats are overpopulating the sewers in the French neighborhood, coming into the homes of the French families, and you start to have European cases of bubonic plague and some of the outbreaks in the early 20th century after the opening of the sewers.
So the French get very freaked out by this, and they decide they need to act fast. They hire a bunch of Vietnamese exterminators to go down into the sewers and kill the rats, which is where we come back to that list that Van found in the archives.
So this is compiled in the spring and summer of 1902, and it's a list of the total rat kills. In the first week, they're pulling up hundreds of rats. A month into the project, they're pulling up in one day on May 19th, 7,442. The high point, I believe, according to these records, was in June 12th, 1902. They killed 20,114 rats.
20,000 rats killed in a day.
In a day. And this is, I'm looking at the spreadsheet here, and I'm looking at numbers 7,000, 6,000, 8,000, 7,000, 10,000, 11,000, 15,000, 9,000. So there seems to be an endless supply of rats. They're not making a dent on it.
Clearly, the French are going to need more than a few exterminators to solve the problem. And someone has an idea.
They decide that they're going to turn to the civic responsibility of the Vietnamese residents of Hanoi. So they set out a bounty.
To collect the cash bounty, people had to bring in the rats' tails as proof of their kills.
Thousands of rat tails are being delivered to the city hall. The French think they're really making a dent into the rat population. Then a few months later, one of the health officials is out in the suburbs of Hanoi, just outside the city limits. And it's just outside the city limits where a lot of shady business would go on. You'd have smugglers out there, you'd have houses of ill repute and so forth. And he was checking out one of these villages on the edge of Hanoi and discovered a rat farm. And the Vietnamese were growing rats, cutting off their tails and bringing them into the city, to the city hall, to collect the bounty. This is absolutely a disaster in terms of trying to remove rats, but it does show that the Vietnamese are really catching on with the entrepreneurial spirit that the French wanted to instill in them.
The French were idiots, and no one nowadays should make that mistake. But unfortunately, the problem is not with design. The problem is with how short-sighted and selfish people will be when the reward can be obtained. In Kentucky, there's a literacy program that will pay up to $690 per month to parents of illiterate children. The money is intended to help parents hire tutors for their child so as to raise literacy in the area. Instead, parents are pulling their children out of school and forbidding them to learn, lest they lose the money. Yes, you heard me right. People are willing to ruin their children's lives and future for about $8,000 a year. Nobody benefits from this. The children have less chance of success than Chinese laborers. The parents are encouraged to hurt the children's future more since they already have no chance. And the government ends up losing more than $100,000 per child over the course of the child's life. It would literally be better if the program did not exist anymore.
Sometimes badly designed charity can be worse than no charity at all. What about too much charity? If more people give welfare, every individual can spend less money while the individuals receive more overall benefits. Could it possibly go wrong? Well, sometimes it turns out that too much generosity can result in people ending up in even more trouble. We understand that someone who makes $10 a day would need more aid than someone who makes $100 a day. Both of them might take welfare from the same organization, but the latter would receive less overall welfare. This concept is known as marginal loss, or how much benefits decrease for every extra dollar in income. In order to incentivize the person to make more money, usually marginal loss is set at less than $1. However, most charities are smart. They recognize this and they set marginal loss well below $1, so that people have a strong motivation to earn more and eventually wean themselves off welfare completely. However, when multiple charities get involved, things get tricky. Let's say there are 3 charities in the city and they all have their marginal loss set to 20 cents for each dollar. This means that if a poor person uses all 3 programs, they would experience a total marginal loss of 60 cents to the dollar. Working more increases their income slowly, but still leaves them with more money than before. The system works as intended.
Fortunately, it is not always possible. Let us say that in a large city, 7 charities exist, unaware of each other's existence. They set the marginal loss to 20 cents. This means that if a person collects from all of the charities, then the total marginal loss will be $1.40 for every dollar they make. So this person is actually losing money for working more. they would have less money to spend overall than someone who worked for less. So they would most likely cut back on the earnings to earn as much welfare as possible. And they could work under the table to avoid reporting their true income to government and charities. This means that charities are losing more money than necessary. The government is not collecting its fair share of tax revenue, and the person not only has partial resume, but also will have missed out on pay raises and promotions that they will need once welfare dollars start running. And this is only for measurable cash charity. There are countless welfare programs like subsidized housing, homeless shelters, bread lines, etc. that don't have a set dollar value or way of implementing marginal laws. If you qualify, you pay the same treatment as anyone richer or poorer.
Once again, this is a problem with poor-ism, namely a lack of coordination. If charities could all contact each other easily and make joint decisions on marginal loss for benefits, then they could minimize the number of people who decide not to work. There are always people who will be willing to abuse any system that exists. There's very little we can do to eliminate these extreme outliers. It's merely a side effect of the existence of charity. However, what we can do is make sure that the hardworking men and women who are trying their best to support themselves and their families are not penalized for failing to abuse charity. For this purpose, we cannot force charities to cooperate. We cannot make them change their policies. We can push through government agencies to help coordinate charities. We can raise awareness of the problem of perverse incentives. And we can make sure that people understand no one wants to be poor. No one wants to take handouts. Everyone has their pride in working a good job, earning good pay, and living on what they made with their own two hands. No one wants to take a handout. Some people just don't have any other choice. So please, go to our website at www.paidtobepoor.weebly.com. Spread the word, and maybe one day we can make sure that no one ever has to suffer.